Thor, the mighty god of thunder, meets opponents he cannot defeat. His hammer, Mjolnir, fails him. His legendary strength means nothing. What could possibly challenge the strongest of the Norse gods? The answer might surprise you, because this isn't a story about strength at all. This is about perception, humility, and the awesome power of nature itself. I'm Matt Holloway with the Pagan Temple, and welcome to the series formerly known as Mythology Matters. The name is going to change, so bear with me on that, where we explore why ancient stories still speak to us today. Before we dive into this tale, let's talk about where it comes from and why it mattered. The story appears in the Prose Edda, written by Icelandic scholar named Snorri Sturluson, around the year 1220. Now, Snorri was writing centuries after the Viking Age ended, but he was preserving much older oral traditions that had been passed down through generations. Why does this matter? Well, it's because by Snorri's time, Scandinavia had already converted to Christianity. These myths were in danger of being lost forever, so Snorri wrote them down to preserve Norse cultural heritage. This particular story reveals something important about Norse values. Yes, the Norse celebrated warriors and strength, but they also deeply valued wisdom, cleverness, and understanding your place in the natural world. The story teaches all of that, and it's one of those few myths where Thor, the protector of gods and man, faces challenges he absolutely cannot overcome. We're going to go over a quick pronunciation guide before we start because Norse names can be a little tricky. So we're going to talk about Utgard, meaning outer enclosure or the realm beyond civilization. It's an actual giant's castle. We're going to talk about Utgard-Loki. This is not the same Loki that is Thor's companion that we know from a lot of the other Norse myths. This is the name of an actual Jotun or giant. It's a completely different being. Again, he's the king of the giants. Then we have Skrimir, another giant, and we have Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. Got it? Let's get into the story. Our story begins with Thor, the thunder god, deciding to journey into Jotunheim. That's the realm of the giants. He takes his companion, Loki, the trickster god, and two human servants, Thialfi and Roskva. They're traveling through wild country when evening comes. They need shelter for the night. They find what looks like a huge hall with a wide entrance. Perfect, right? They settle in to sleep, but during the night, the ground starts shaking. There's tremendous rumbling noise. The whole building trembles. Terrified, they huddle in a side room until morning. When dawn comes, they go outside and discover something quite shocking. That wasn't a building that they were in. They had been sleeping in the glove of a giant so massive that his glove was the size of a hall. And that side room that they hid in, that was the thumb of the glove. The giant then wakes up. His name is Skrimir, and he's enormous, even by giant standards. But he seems friendly enough. He offers to travel them toward Utgard, the stronghold of the giant king, and that evening they camp again. Skrimir shares his provisions bag with them and goes to sleep. His snoring sounds like thunder. It's so loud that they can't rest. Thor and his companions, they decide that they're hungry, and they try to open Skrimir's bag to get the provisions that he provided them. But here's where things get strange. Thor, the god of strength, cannot even untie the knots in this bag. He pulls, he strains, nothing. The knots won't budge. Frustrated and angry, Thor decides to wake the giant. He takes Mjolnir, his mighty hammer, and strikes Skrimir on the head. Whack! The giant stirs slightly and says, did a leaf fall on me? Then goes back to sleep. Thor, being stunned. His hammer blow did nothing? Later in the night, Thor decides to try again. He strikes even harder. Wham! Skrimir mumbles. Did an acorn drop on my head? Goes back to sleep. Near dawn, Thor, still being hungry, decides to strike a third time with all of his divine might. Skrimir wakes up and says, I think some birds must be in the tree above me. Did something fall? Then he gets up, says goodbye to the traveling companions, and warns them that there are much bigger giants ahead at Utgard, and he tells them not to act too proud when they get there. Thor and his companions are a little shaken, but they reach Utgard, and it's so massive they literally are able to squeeze through the bars of the gate just to enter. Inside, they meet Utgard-Loki, the giant king. He's sitting on his throne, and he's not particularly impressed with these visitors. In fact, he mocks them. He says, nobody's allowed to stay at Utgard unless they are the best at something. They must prove their worth. Loki volunteers to go first. He's obviously a little cocky. He boasts that he can eat faster than anyone. A giant named Logi steps forward. They place a huge trough of meat between them. The contest begins. Both eat with incredible speed, racing toward the middle, but when they meet, Loki has eaten all the meat from the bones. However, Logi has eaten not only the meat, but the bones and the trough itself. Obviously, Loki wins. Loki was defeated. Next, Thialfi, the human servant, says he is the fastest runner in Midgard. So a giant named Hugi races against him. They run 3 times. Each time, Hugi is so fast that he's able to reach the finish line, turn around, and wait before Thialfi is even close to it. Obviously, again, Hugi wins easily, Thialfi is defeated. Now it's Thor's turn, and he's a little upset. Utgard-Loki says Thor's already looking pretty drunk, so maybe he should just do a drinking contest. A drinking horn is brought out. It doesn't look that big, and Utgard-Loki explains that good drinkers can empty this horn in 1 draught. Weaker drinkers need 2. Nobody ever needs 3. Thor is the god of strength. He's confident. He's accomplished many great things at this point. So he puts the horn to his lips and drinks with all his might. He drinks until his lungs and chest are bursting. He stops, looks at the horn. The level has barely even dropped. He's embarrassed, but he decides to try again, drinking even longer and harder than before. Again, only a little bit was gone. The 3rd time, with everything he has, the level drops a bit more, but the horn is still mostly full. Thor has failed. Utgard-Loki mocks him. He says, Thor's strength must be exaggerated. Maybe Thor should try something easier. He points to a small gray cat sitting by the fire. Hey, can Thor lift that cat? Thor reaches down. The cat doesn't look very heavy, but when he tries to lift it, it won't budge. He pulls harder. He strains with all his divine might. Finally, at the very limit, he manages to lift 1 paw of the cat off the ground. Just 1 paw. Then he has to give up. Defeated. The giants laugh at him. Utgard-Loki says maybe Thor should just try to wrestle someone. How about this old woman, Ellie? She's an elderly woman. She's stooped, wrinkled. Thor can obviously take her. Thor is beyond caring about honor now, so he agrees. They begin to wrestle, but the more Thor exerts himself, the firmer Ellie stands. She doesn't just use fancy techniques, she just resists him. And despite everything Thor does, Ellie is able to force him down to 1 knee. Not much more, but just 1 knee. But for Thor, that is defeat. He's defeated again. Utgard-Loki stops the match. He says they've proven themselves enough in their own way. They can stay for the night. The next morning, Utgard-Loki personally escorts them out of the city. Once they're safely outside the walls, he stops them. I'm going to tell you the truth now, he says, and I'll never let you back inside because you're far too dangerous. Then he reveals everything. Skrimir? That was actually Utgard-Loki in disguise. The food bag, he tied it with iron and magic. Nobody could have opened it. Thor had no chance. Those hammer blows that did nothing, they didn't strike the giant. They simply struck the mountains. Thor had carved out 3 deep valleys with his strikes and didn't realize it. He'd hit the ground, not the giant. That eating contest, Loki wasn't a giant that ate the trough, the meat, the bones. He was wildfire itself. Nothing can consume faster than fire. The race, Hugi wasn't a giant. He was thought. Nothing is faster than thought. The drinking horn, well, that was actually connected to the ocean. Thor had actually drank so much that he lowered the sea levels. That's why we now have tides. The cat, that was Jormungandr, the world serpent that circles the entire earth. Thor had lifted it so high that its back left the ocean floor. The giants were absolutely terrified. And Ellie, the old woman, she was old age itself. Nobody defeats old age. Everyone falls to it eventually. That Thor fell to only one knee, that he even resisted at all, was absolutely astounding and what terrified the giant. Thor had competed against fundamental forces of nature and reality itself. Think about it. And he'd done far better than should have even been possible. At that moment, Utgard-Loki vanishes. The whole castle vanishes. Thor raises his hammer to strike, but there's nothing there. Just open plains. They return home, and Thor never speaks of this journey again. So why did the Norse people tell this story? What did it teach them? First, it reminded everyone that even the gods, that limits exist. Thor represents strength, protection, and power. He is the defender of both gods and man, but this story shows that raw power isn't everything. There are forces even Thor cannot overcome. Second, it revealed the true powers of nature. Think about what Thor was actually fighting. He wasn't drinking from a horn, he was fighting the ocean. He was fighting time itself, old age, fire. These are fundamental forces that shape our existence. The Norse people lived close to nature. They sailed dangerous seas. They aged. They watched fire consume. They understood that these forces demanded respect. Thirdly, this story taught about wisdom and perception. Things are not always what they seem. Thor thought he was failing. He felt humiliated. But actually, he was accomplishing impossible tasks. He was literally moving the ocean. He was lifting the world serpent and resisting old age. Time itself. The Norse valued cleverness and understanding as much as they valued strength. Odin, the chief of the Aesir, sacrificed his own eye for wisdom. This story fits that same value system. It says, understand what you're really facing. Don't just trust surface appearances. True wisdom sees beneath the illusion presented to you. And there's something else here too. Thor was humble enough to compete even after failing. He keeps trying. He wrestles an old woman when he could have just walked away in anger. That persistence, that willingness to try even when you're losing, the Norse respected that deeply. So what can modern pagans take from this story? First, humility in practice. When your spiritual practice feels ineffective, remember Thor's journey. You might be making more progress than you realize. If you can't meditate without your mind wandering, maybe you're not actually failing. Maybe you're learning to notice your thoughts more clearly, which is exactly one of the things that meditation teaches. Are you struggling to feel the presence of a deity? Maybe the divine is already there, but in a form that you haven't learned to recognize. Your magical work doesn't seem to create results for you? Well, maybe it's working on a scale that you can't see yet. Like the instance with Thor lowering the ocean level and didn't even know it. Sometimes we're not failing. We're just facing forces bigger than we understood. And we're doing better than we know. Second, learning to respect natural forces. Modern paganism emphasizes working with nature, not dominating it. This story reminds us why. You cannot control the ocean, you cannot stop time, and you cannot avoid aging, and of course, you cannot prevent change. But you can work with these forces. You can respect them, and you can learn from them. You can honor them in your own personal practice. When you create sacred space in nature, you're not commanding the land. You're entering into relationship with it. That's the Norse understanding that this myth teaches. And third, perception and growth. Your spiritual journey isn't always what it appears to be. That year when nothing seemed to happen in your practice, maybe you were building onto foundations that you simply couldn't see. That deity that seems silent, maybe they're teaching you to listen. That ritual that feels empty, it may have just planted seeds that will grow into something later down the road. The Norse understood that true growth often looks like failure until you understand what you're actually accomplishing. And finally, It's okay to face impossible things. Thor competed against the ocean, against old age and the world serpent. He lost all these contests, but he tried anyway. He persisted through it. Your spiritual practice will sometimes put you against things that feel impossible. Deep healing, generational trauma, major life changes, and just loss. You might not win in the way that you imagine victory to be, but showing up, trying anyway, persisting, even when you feel like you're failing, that has value. That has power. The Norse saw nobility in striving against impossible odds. There's wisdom in that for all of us. One quick important note. This is specifically Norse mythology from the Scandinavian tradition. These are stories and deities of Germanic peoples from that specific region. While many pagan paths honor similar themes of humility and respect for nature's power, the specific deities and stories here belong to the Norse tradition. If you practice Celtic paganism, Hellenic, Kemetic, or another path, your tradition has its own powerful stories about these same themes. Look for them. Don't assume all pagan traditions share the same myths or practices. If you're drawn to Norse paganism specifically, I encourage you to research the culture, the historical context, and approach it with respect. These are spiritual traditions with very deep roots, and these aren't just stories to collect and practices to collect, okay? If you want to read the story yourself in a good translation, I recommend Jackson Crawford's translations. Dr. Crawford is a Norse scholar, and his translations are both accurate and accessible, but there are other translations out there. This story, I believe, is also in Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology book, so if you want to pick that up. I'll see about linking some of these books in the description below. They may be affiliate links, which means if you purchase them through them, it supports this channel. It supports the Pagan Temple at no extra cost to you, and we greatly appreciate it. For a deeper dive into Norse mythology and practice, again, there'll be a link in there to kind of give you a little bit of a primer on Norse paganism and a list of books where you can learn more. Definitely follow this channel. We'll be posting more of these videos. Join our Discord server so that we can have these conversations. It's completely free. We have channels dedicated specifically to different traditions, including Norse paganism, where you can discuss stories like this one with other people and share your own ideas and your own stories as well. In the Pagan Temple, we support each other, we share resources, we explore these paths together. Again, links will be in the description of the video. And, of course, I want to hear from you. What surprised you most about this story? What's some things about it that you took away from it? Did you even know Thor had a story where he lost an encounter? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The next video will be traveling to the Celtic lands for a story of Etain, a goddess who was transformed into a butterfly, reborn as a human, and had no memory of who she was, and searched for thousands of years. It's one of Irish mythology's most beautiful tales, and it teaches profound lessons about transformation and remembering who you truly are. And of course, hit the subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of the future videos. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and remember, education builds understanding. And I'm Matt Holloway, and this is the Pagan Temple.